So if you were with me for my last video, my short water pump, and Chevy made two, a long and a short, and it's basically the distance between this flange and the back of the water pump that's long or short. Corvettes come with a short. This aftermarket timing chain cover stuck out further than the original, and therefore there was interference between the back of the water pump and the timing chain cover, and you couldn't get the mating surfaces to mate. And I was concerned I was going to have to take off that timing chain cover, which would mean draining the oil, because I had to take the oil pan off and a bunch of other things. Well, I did some research, and after some research and a trip to Summit Racing, I came up with these. They are water pump shims. These are 1/8 inch thick. They come in all kinds of different lengths. I guess it's for people who are building hot rods and things where it doesn't necessarily fit any particular car year or model. So what I'm going to do is open this. That might take me a while because the way they seal everything nowadays. But they give you 4 gaskets, one for each side of the shim on each side. And they give you 2 shims. Now what I'm going to do, just because experience is a good teacher, I'm going to go ahead and dry mount the water pump with the shims to make sure that they are going to actually solve the problem. So while I struggle with cutting these things out of the packing, I'm going to shut the camera off, and then we'll test fit the water pump with the shims in it. So I did the test fit without recording it, and it looks pretty good. However, I'm back to complaining about vintage air, because the instructions they give you show a 1/4 inch spacer on their compressor bracket in the back and a 1 inch spacer for their front hole of the compressor bracket. I would think that that is for an exhaust manifold, because the bolt flanges on the exhaust manifold are probably different lengths. So this shows a 1/4 inch in the back and a 1 inch at the rear. And up here it says 58 to 65 Corvette with ram horn manifold with alternator boss. Use 1/4 inch spacer in rear and 1 inch spacer in front. So I'm guessing that's the 58 to 65 drawing right there. I have a 76. Secondly, it says for headers, this bracket was designed to use 3/8 inch flange headers. If using 3/8 flange headers, you must use 2-inch spacer between the compressor bracket and the flange. If using 1/4-inch flange headers, you must also use a 1/8-inch spacer between compressor bracket, spacer, and flange. Now, I'm assuming that this is the bracket they're talking about, where you have to use a 2-inch spacer, and it would make sense that you need 2-inch spacers on front and back of that, or two 2 inches and two 1/8 inches if you only have a 1/4-inch flange on your header. So, in looking at the parts they gave me, I did in fact find a 2-inch spacer that looks like a 2-inch spacer. I'll have to measure it, but yep, 2 inches. And I just thought of something. When I was painting those flanges, they could be because, the brackets. It could be that they were packaged separately or something, but looks like I have another 2-inch spacer. So, sorry, Vintage Air, you did provide two 2-inch spacers. But apparently they were packaged separately, one in the with the brackets and one with the hardware. I don't know why I would have only painted one of them versus two. But apparently I need to put both of these on. And I don't know if they gave me bolts for that. But they also are going to hold the header on, the bolts. So why am I talking about this now? Well, there's a couple things. Well, let me first show you the spacing that I have with those 1/8-inch spacers for the water pump. So kind of tight, but right in here. I guess you're not going to be able to see it unless I put some light behind it. But there is a gap, now that I've done that, between trying to get light underneath it without shining it directly into the lens so that you can't see anything. There's the light right over here. Okay, had to move the camera a little bit yet. So I've got it snugged down to the block, and actually when I put it on, because of the gaskets, it's going to be a little further away, but those did the trick as far as giving me clearance. Now, whether it's going to present a problem with the alignment of the belts, that's another story, but we'll deal with that when we come to it. But got to talk about the brackets that need to go on here. Now, keep in mind that I bought a Vintage Air kit that was for a 76 Corvette that already had air conditioning from the factory. So this is the factory bracket for the air conditioning, and these two places where the water pump bolt holes go through here. And that's where it's attached. Well, you can see the bracket that Vintage Air gives you is very much different, and in fact, it only bolts to the top hole here, the top bolt on the water pump. So I wasn't able to quite snug up the bolts on the water pump, but I can verify that this one has gone in far enough. This top one has gone in far enough so that when I put this 1/4 inch bracket under it, which goes in like so, that's going to take up enough space so that that bolt doesn't bottom out. Well, Vintage Air gives you a little bit longer bolt, I think, unless I misread the instructions, but it seems that it's a little bit longer bolt. Although I don't know if it has to be, come to think of it. I better double check that, because the bolt under here, where the other leg of that bracket went, right here, that one does not bottom out. It needs a spacer, and they didn't provide a spacer, unless I read the instructions wrong. I'm going to go back and do that. It seems they want a spacer under this one, but not under this one. And then it all has to line up with the bracket that bolts into the head with those 2-inch spacers. So I am going to try to, I probably need to find out what the flange thickness is on my headers before I can proceed, because what I'm going to try to do is put on the bracket that goes here that it ultimately bolts to the compressor bolts to it, and this one, and I want to have them be lined up so that when I put this in the water pump bolts on, that I don't have to move this afterwards, which would entail loosening the water pump. So I got to get me enough spacers and correct alignment on that head to make sure that everything is good once I put this water pump on. So here's my mock-up of the bracket for the air conditioner compressor. I'm just going to snug that up. And that's not tight enough. I don't want to tighten it any further because it's bottoming out in the hole. So I'm going to have to put some more spacers just to take up that slack. But they're going to be on, let me get out of the way of the camera, they're going to be on the outside of the bracket. And like I I said, just to take up the slack. That should give me the ability to bolt that on there and line this up like so. But I'll have to take that off, and fortunately I bought some other spacers, and like I said, they're not critical for the length like the inside one was, because that's mimicking the thickness of the these spacers right in here are mimicking the thickness of the flange on the header. So I'll be taking this off again. I bought a pack of spacers at Summit Racing to take up the slack on that one where Vintage Air didn't give me the one for the like that. Just doesn't feel like it's going in as smooth as it oughta. And that's because by the time I put these spacers in, I guess I put too big of ones. That's jammed onto that nut now, or the bolt. I have to pry that off. Well, there shouldn't be a spacer when it's all said and done. Because I could have left that on there. Oh well. So, I'm going to put this on, the 2-inch spacer, and then I have 3 spacers to actually mimic the thickness of the flange. The total 3/8 of an inch. That's going much smoother now that I've got. All I want is that to be snug so that I can align the brackets when I put them on. I don't want them to really be tight. Okay, so we'll get a small spacer for the outside, relatively small I should say. Okay, that is tight enough for sizing it up. So, in order to make this video a little shorter, what I'm going to do, first I have to make sure I know the proper size spacer to put on this. That should be good, because that's bottomed out in that hole. It'll put it a little bit shy of bottoming out, which is perfect. But as I was saying, I'm going to put gasket sealant on those gaskets and put the spacers on, and then I'll be back to install it on the block. I think today, instead of using that gasket sealant, I am going to actually use RTV, because I don't think the gaskets that came with this are quite as smooth as the ones that came with the water pump. Or I guess it wasn't the water pump at all, it was the gasket set for rebuilding the engine. So I'm going to make sure that this is good for antifreeze. And the only thing it says, it's not recommended for use on head gaskets or parts that are continually immersed in gasoline. So gasoline shouldn't be on the water pump, so we're good there. So I'm going to go ahead and put this on the gaskets and on the spacers, and when I'm ready to install the water pump, I'll turn the camera back on. So this instruction sheet says to use a 1/4-inch spacer between that bracket and the water pump boss. But since I already have, I'm sorry, an 1/8-inch spacer, I think I said a 1/4. 0.125, that's an 1/8. But I added an 1/8 of an inch back here behind the water pump, so I'm not going to use the 1/8-inch spacer between that bracket, because that will move the bracket away from this one here. So that's how we're going to approach this. I think we'll be okay. So that's it. I'm going to get those ready to install. So this one has the spacer in both gaskets, and they're both coated with RTV. This has one gasket and a spacer, and the gasket, or the spacer, is coated with RTV. So I'm just going to install the gasket over that. Now, I like to install, or to put the RTV on the gasket itself rather than on where it's mounting to, for the most part, unless you're absolutely certain, like I was on those spacers, they exactly match these holes. But the reason I like to put it on there is because if it's on the gasket, you're guaranteed you can't miss it if you put it on the block and put it in the wrong place, then potentially you could miss the gasket, and the sealer would do you no good. This what I'm working on now actually has 2 bolt holes and 2 water passages, so we've got to go around all of them. The other one only has 2 bolt holes, no water passage, so I don't need to go around that last hole. And then the trick is going to be try to hold this and all these bolts and get it lined up, start the bolts without screwing up the gasket or the RTV. So the bolt holes are blind holes into the block, so there shouldn't be any water going into those, so there's no danger of anything being wrong there. So I'm going to aim the camera back over to the block. And try to get this lined up. Now, the top hole on this side is not so important to get the bolt in because that's where that bracket goes. So I've got 3 of them started. This one now needs a bracket. And before I tighten it, that bracket's got to be lined up with the other bracket that holds the compressor. Throw a nut in there, or a bolt in there. Get ready to snug this down. And it does look like I do have just a wee bit more clearance between the block and the, I'm sorry, the timing chain cover and the water pump than I had when the when I didn't have the gaskets. I only had the spacers. So now I can take my ratchet and just snug that up a little bit. I know I've got alignment there on that bracket for the power steering, or the air conditioner. So I feel pretty good about this solution to that dilemma compared to other alternatives, which were to take the timing chain cover off and redo it. That would not have been a cheap or easy solution. So keep going over these and snugging them down a little more. That should be just enough to squeeze that RTV and seal all of the imperfections that might be in the water pump or the block or the spacers. So it's like the water pump is on, except for one minor detail, and that's to change the nipple, because I think that's 3/4 and the Vintage Air has 1/2 inch. So I bought new nipples there. I'm going to check to make sure it's the right size and then change it. So I'm going to zoom in on that nipple that I'm going to replace, and then that's 3/4, and I'll put the one I bought to replace it, which is chrome because the water pump is chrome, and I bought aluminum for the manifold because the manifold is aluminum. But you should be able to see the difference between these two. And basically all I will do is take a wrench, can't find my crescent wrenches now. I don't know what size that is. Try my biggest wrenches. Oops, that's tightening. I'm going to go the other way. And basically, I'll put some thread sealant on here that before I put the sealant on it, I'm just going to check two things. My wrench fits, and that the thread's the right size. I can see I'm going to have to find my crescent wrench or an open end for that, because that box end is not going to fit in the opening that I have available, the space I have available. This pipe compound is really thick. It should work pretty well. See if I can do it with this one. Nope, that's a 7/8 inch. 1 inch. I'm gonna have to shut off the camera because I don't think I have a 7/8 in my whole chest that I have unlocked. I'm gonna have to unlock the other one. And try with the open end wrench. If that doesn't work, then possibly a thin wall socket is what's needed. And this I can get about 1/8 of a turn, so it'll be fine. Okay, that's that. Next up, while I'm working on that, I might as well put the one into the intake manifold. I'll back off. This is the front of the engine because it has the water neck. And looks like I'm going to need a plug on the other side because, and I didn't buy anything like that. This is an aluminum hose nipple. Again, 5/8 to match the Vintage Air hose size, which it kind of baffles me why they would make it different than stock, but it is what it is. We got the pipe sealant on it. I don't want to turn this too tight because both of these things are aluminum, and aluminum strips it easily, so I'm going to go with that. The sealant should do its job. And that should be a done deal. next episode, I'm going to probably be putting on the Sniper fuel injection main throttle body. Have a nice day.